All right, ready to dive into Ficus bonsai care. We're going to cover everything you need to know to grow and style these incredible miniature trees.
The most important thing to remember is that ficus bonsai are tropical plants.
Ah, so we need to think about their natural environment.
Exactly. To keep them happy and healthy, we want to replicate that environment as closely as possible. That means giving them lots of sunlight, keeping them warm, and making sure they get consistent moisture.
Okay, let's break those down one by one, starting with placement.
Ficus bonsai absolutely love bright, indirect light. So
Right.
think of it this way. Like imagine a spot
Yeah.
that's well lit, but doesn't have like direct
Yeah.
sunbeams, you know?
Yeah.
So a few feet back from a south-facing window
Mm-hmm.
is often perfect.
Gotcha.
You want enough light to keep it happy,
Yeah.
but not so much that it gets scorched.
Okay, so what about the temperature then?
Consistency is really key for tropicals like
Yeah,
these.
yeah.
You want to aim for between 18 and 24 degrees Celsius,
Okay.
and they don't like sudden changes in temperature.
Right.
So keep them away from like drafts or those heating vents.
Yeah, no drafty windows or fireplaces for these guys.
Nope.
Now here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Ficus are actually pretty adaptable.
Mm-hmm.
You can even keep them outdoors during the summer months. But remember, as soon as the temperature dips below 10 degrees Celsius,
Okay.
it's time to bring them back inside. Okay, what about watering?
The secret is balance. You want to keep the soil moist, but you don't want to drown the roots.
Okay, so how do we find that sweet spot?
Allow the top inch or so of soil to dry out a bit between waterings.
So I can just check with my finger?
Exactly. If it feels dry to the touch, it's time to give it a good drink. And when you water, water thoroughly until you see the water draining out of the bottom of the pot.
That makes sense.
The type of water matters too.
Oh, okay.
Rainwater is best for your ficus bonsai.
Okay.
But if you're using tap water, just let it sit out for a couple days.
Okay.
Let that chlorine evaporate.
Oh, interesting. I never thought about that.
Yeah, it can be a bit harsh on those delicate roots.
Right. Now imagine bringing home a new Ficus bonsai
Right.
is kind of like adopting a pet.
Mm-hmm.
They need time to settle in, right?
Absolutely.
Okay,
It's easy to get carried away with
Yeah.
like styling and pruning right off the bat.
for sure.
But remember, your bonsai has just gone through a big change.
Mm-hmm.
So give it a few weeks to acclimatize
Okay.
to its new home
Right.
before you start making any drastic changes.
Okay.
But for now, focus on those basics.
Yeah.
Light temperature
Right.
and consistent watering. That's
Mhm.
going to set you up for success.
Solid advice.
Thanks.
Now, once our Ficus bonsai is all
Mhm.
settled in and happy,
Mm-hmm.
what about giving it a nutritional boost?
Yeah.
I'm talking fertilizer.
Fertilizing is essential.
Okay.
It provides your bonsai with the nutrients it needs
Mm-hmm.
to thrive, especially during the growing season,
Okay.
which for ficus is typically spring and summer.
Right. Yeah.
So
So what kind of fertilizer should we be using here?
a balanced fertilizer specifically formulated for bonsai
Okay.
is your best bet.
Mm-hmm.
You'll find plenty of options
Yeah.
at your local nursery or online.
Right.
And remember, a little goes a long way.
Right. Don't want to overload it.
Exactly.
So how often should we be fertilizing?
During the growing season, every 2 weeks is perfect.
Okay.
You want to give it consistent nourishment.
Gotcha.
As we move into fall and winter,
Mm-hmm.
you can ease up on the fertilizing
Right.
as the bonsai's growth naturally slows down.
Yeah. Makes sense.
It's all about working with its natural rhythm.
Okay. So light temperature water and a little food.
Yeah.
Got it.
Once your bonsai has settled in and you start seeing healthy new growth, you can definitely start thinking about pruning and wiring.
Awesome. Let's delve into those techniques. What's the best approach to pruning a ficus bonsai?
Well, you'll be doing two main types of pruning. There's maintenance pruning, which you can do throughout the year.
So that's just for keeping things tidy?
Yeah, basically removing any dead or diseased branches and just maintaining the basic shape. Then there's the more structural pruning, where you're really shaping the bonsai.
Ah, I see. And when's the best time to do that heavier pruning?
It's best to wait for the growing season, ideally in spring or early summer. The tree heals and recovers much quicker then.
Makes sense. And any specific tools we should be using?
Always use sharp, clean bonsai shears. That way you can make precise cuts just above a leaf node.
So we can do some light trimming here and there, but the major shaping should be saved for the growing season. Now, wiring. That sounds a bit intimidating. What's that all about?
Wiring is a technique that uses, well, wire to gently bend and shape the branches of your bonsai.
Specialized bonsai wire, I presume.
That's right. And it's best to do this during the growing season when the branches are more flexible.
Okay, so walk us through the basics of wiring a ficus bonsai. Where do we even start?
First, you need to choose a wire that's about 1/3 the thickness of the branch you're going to bend. Start at the trunk and wrap the wire around the branch at a 45-degree angle, working your way up to the tip.
How tight should the wire be?
Snug, but not too tight. You don't want to damage the bark. Gently bend the branch into the shape you want as you go.
So it's like sculpting the branches into an artful form. How long do we leave the wire on?
You'll need to keep a close eye on the wired branches because as the tree grows, the wire can start to cut into the bark.
But we need to remove it before that happens.
Exactly. Typically, you'll need to remove or readjust the wire every few months, depending on how fast your bonsai is growing.
Got it. Regular checkups are essential.
Let's talk about another crucial aspect
All right.
of ficus bonsai care. Repotting.
Yeah.
That's something every bonsai owner needs to know.
Absolutely.
If you want to keep your ficus bonsai, healthy, vibrant, it's not just about giving the roots some breathing room.
Right.
You're also refreshing the soil, encouraging that healthy growth.
Absolutely. So, okay, let's say you've got your ficus bonsai there. How can you actually tell if it's time to give it a new pot?
Well, there's some pretty obvious signs, like if you're seeing roots just circling around on the surface of the soil, or even poking out of those drainage holes at the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
That's a pretty clear signal.
Yeah.
It means those roots, they've run out of space.
Yeah, they're trying to escape.
Exactly.
Now, what about the growth of the tree itself? Can that tell us anything?
Yeah, absolutely. If you see that your ficus is just not growing much,
Okay.
that could definitely be a sign that the roots are cramped, need more space to spread out.
Gotcha.
And, I hate to say it, but if you can lift your ficus out of the pot, gently,
Yeah.
and you just see this massive, dense root ball, hardly any soil, you might have waited a little too long.
Yeah, it's probably time for repotting then.
Definitely time to repot.
Okay, so we've got all these different ways to tell if our bonsai is saying, hey, I need a bigger home. Is there like a specific season that works best, especially for a ficus bonsai?
Yes, absolutely. Summer is the prime time to repot.
Okay, summer.
During those summer months, they're in their active growing season, which means they're going to recover faster from the stress of repotting.
Oh.
And they can really establish themselves in that new pot much more efficiently.
So it's kind of like giving them a new home right when they're full of energy and ready to take off and grow.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Now, what about how often we should be repotting? Is this an annual event?
Well, it really depends.
Okay.
On the age and growth rate of your bonsai. So younger bonsai, they're still actively growing, developing their root system.
Right.
Those guys usually need to be repotted every 1 to 2 years.
So they're like teenagers, always outgrowing their clothes.
Exactly.
But what about the older bonsai, the more, established ones? Do they need to be repotted as often?
Not as much. Once your ficus matures and the growth slows down,
Okay.
you can repot less frequently, maybe every 3 to 5 years.
Okay, gotcha.
That's usually enough to refresh the soil.
Yeah.
And give those roots enough space to develop.
So it's really all about observing your bonsai.
Right.
And, recognizing its own individual needs as it grows and changes over time.
Exactly.
Cool. Now let's actually get into the nitty-gritty of the repotting process itself.
Mm-hmm.
What are the first steps we should be taking?
Well, before we even touch the tree, make sure we have all the right tools and materials ready.
Right.
You're going to need a bonsai pot, obviously.
Yeah.
But it needs to be the right size. And then a good soil mix, specifically designed for a ficus bonsai.
Okay.
You'll need pruning shears.
Okay.
And a root hook.
Sounds like we're prepping for surgery.
Almost.
So I'm guessing choosing the right pot is pretty important. What should we be looking for?
Definitely. It should be a bit larger than the one it's in now.
Okay, a bit larger.
So, those roots have some room to grow. And those drainage holes, super important. You don't want your bonsai sitting in water.
Right. Good drainage is key. Now, what about the soil mix? Why do we need a special mix just for ficus bonsai?
Good question. Ficus bonsai, they like soil that drains well but also holds a little bit of moisture, a good balance. And a specialized mix, it usually has things like akadama,
Okay.
pumice, lava rock. These all help create that ideal balance.
So the soil composition is really key. All right, let's get to the action, removing the tree from its current pot. How do we actually do that?
Okay, so you got to be gentle but firm.
Okay.
You start by loosening the soil around the edges of the pot.
Okay.
Then you carefully work that tree out.
Yeah.
You can use the root hook to help disentangle any stubborn roots.
Oh, okay. So this is where patience comes in.
Right.
You don't want to rush it and damage those roots.
Exactly.
All right. So once we've freed the tree from its old pot, what's next?
All right, now's the time to really check out those roots.
Oh.
See what we're working with.
Yeah.
And then we get to root pruning, which is a pretty important part of repotting.
Root pruning sounds a little intimidating, to be honest. Why do we even need to do that?
So it's not just about cramming those roots into a new pot. It's about making sure those roots are healthy and can support the tree's growth.
Yeah.
Root pruning creates this more compact, fibrous root system.
Okay.
And that helps the tree absorb water and nutrients way more efficiently.
Oh, that makes sense.
Plus, it stops the roots from getting all pot-bound
Okay.
and encourages the growth of those finer roots that are really essential for overall health.
So it's not just about fitting into the pot. It's about optimizing the whole root system for better health and growth.
Precisely.
Got it. Now, how much should we actually prune? Like, is there a rule of thumb?
Don't remove more than about a third of the root mass. You want to focus on those thicker, older roots and leave those finer feeder roots alone.
Right, because those are the ones actually absorbing the water and nutrients.
Exactly. But the exact amount to prune, it can vary depending on, the age of your tree, how healthy it is.
Okay.
So it's always best to err on the side of caution.
That makes sense. So we've done the root pruning. Everything's looking good. It's finally time to put the tree in its new home. What do we need to think about when we're positioning the tree in the pot?
Okay. First things first, make sure that pot is clean. Then position the bonsai in the new pot. Make sure it's centered and at the right depth. And fill the pot with your bonsai soil mix. Make sure to work it in around the roots and get rid of any air pockets.
And I'm guessing a good watering in is crucial at this stage.
Absolutely. Water it thoroughly to help those roots settle in.
Okay, so just really soak it all in.
Exactly.
But we can't just go back to our regular watering routine right away, right?
Yeah.
What's the best way to water after repotting?
Yeah. Well, the key is to keep that soil moist, but you won't need to water as often.
Okay.
At least not at first.
Gotcha. Any other aftercare tips we should know about?
After you repot, your ficus bonsai needs a little R&R. Find a nice sheltered spot for it, away from direct sunlight.
Out of the harsh sun.
Yeah, and strong winds, too, for at least a couple of weeks.
Okay, so just let it chill and recover. Makes sense. So when can we start fertilizing again?
Once you see those little signs of new growth, that's your cue.
So the bonsai will tell us when it's ready.
It will. Then you can gradually start easing back into your regular fertilizing schedule.
Awesome. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Placement watering, fertilizing.
Yeah, we have.
And even touched upon repotting.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important to talk about potential problems as well.
Yeah.
What are some common issues that ficus bonsai owners might encounter?
That's a great point. Even with the best care, bonsai can sometimes run into problems. One common issue is leaf drop.
Uh-oh. Why would a ficus bonsai start dropping its leaves?
It can be caused by a few different factors. Sudden changes in temperature, humidity, or light can stress the tree and lead to leaf drop.
So it's like the bonsai's way of telling us that something's not right in its environment.
Exactly. Overwatering or underwatering can also cause leaf drop, so it's really important to find that sweet spot with watering.
So if we see leaves dropping, we need to carefully check the bonsai's environment and watering habits.
Absolutely. Now, another common issue is yellowing leaves.
What causes that?
Often yellowing leaves are a sign of nutrient deficiencies, particularly a lack of iron.
So it's like the bonsai is anemic.
In a way, yes. To remedy this, you can apply a chelated iron supplement, or you can repot the bonsai using a fresh soil mix that's rich in nutrients.
Okay, so if we see yellow leaves, it's time to give the bonsai a nutritional boost.
Exactly. Now let's talk about pests.
Ah, yes. Those pesky little critters. Are ficus bonsai prone to any specific pests?
Unfortunately, yes. Ficus bonsai can be susceptible to pests like aphids, mealybugs, and scale.
I hate those guys. They can be such a nuisance.
They can be. But the key is to catch them early. So regularly inspect your bonsai for any signs of these pests.
Any tips for spotting them?
Look for tiny insects on the leaves or stems, or any unusual sticky residue, which can be a sign of honeydew produced by aphids or mealybugs.
So it's like detective work for bonsai owners.
That's a good way to put it. Now, if you do find any pests, it's important to isolate the affected tree to prevent the infestation from spreading to your other bonsai.
That's a good point. Quarantine the infected bonsai.
Precisely. And then you can treat the infestation with an appropriate insecticide. Or if you prefer a more natural approach, neem oil is a great option.
I love using neem oil. It's a lifesaver for dealing with pests. What about diseases?
Sure.
Are there any specific diseases that ficus bonsai are prone to?
Yes, they can be susceptible to fungal diseases,
Okay.
especially if the soil is too wet
Hmm?
or there's poor air circulation.
Right.
Proper watering and ventilation are
Yeah.
crucial for preventing fungal problems.
Got it. Good drainage and fresh air.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a healthy recipe for any bonsai.
Absolutely. Now we've covered the basics. Let's explore some techniques that can really enhance the look and health of your bonsai.
Sounds exciting. What's first on the list?
Let's talk about defoliation.
Defoliation. That sounds a bit drastic.
It might sound intense, but it's a technique that can dramatically improve both the appearance and the health of your ficus bonsai.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What exactly does defoliation involve?
Essentially, you're removing some or all of the leaves from your bonsai. You're actually encouraging the growth of smaller, more delicate ones.
Interesting. What's the benefit of having smaller leaves?
Well, it leads to a finer, more ramified branch structure and a more compact and refined appearance. It's especially helpful for creating a believable sense of scale in your bonsai.
So it's like hitting the reset button on the foliage and creating a more intricate and detailed look.
Exactly. And because you're redirecting the tree's energy into producing new growth, you end up with a healthier, more vibrant bonsai.
This is fascinating. So when's the best time to defoliate a ficus bonsai?
The ideal time is during the growing seasons, typically late spring or early summer, when the tree has plenty of energy reserves to bounce back.
Makes sense. So we're talking about the same time frame as when we do the more structural pruning.
Exactly. You can choose to defoliate partially by just removing the older, larger leaves, or you can go for a complete defoliation and remove all the leaves.
Wow, complete defoliation. That seems pretty bold.
It can be a little shocking to see your bonsai completely bare, but trust me, it's a technique that's been used for centuries with great results.
I'm definitely going to have to try that with one of my ficus bonsai. So once we've defoliated, what kind of aftercare does the tree need?
It's best to place your bonsai in a slightly shaded area for a week or two after defoliation just to help it recover. Then you can gradually move it back into its normal light conditions.
Okay, so a bit of TLC while those new leaves start to emerge.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Now let's move on to another interesting technique called air layering.
Air layering, what's that all about?
It's a propagation technique that allows you to create a new bonsai from a branch on your existing tree.
Oh, wow. So we're essentially cloning a part of the bonsai.
You got it. It's a fantastic way to propagate a specific variety of ficus, or maybe you have a branch with some unique characteristics that you want to preserve.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So how does air layering actually work?
It involves making a wound on a branch and then encouraging roots to grow from that wound. Once those roots are well developed, you can separate the new plant from the parent tree, and you have a brand new bonsai. Can I walk you through the steps of air layering?
Absolutely, I'm all ears.
First, you'll need to choose a healthy branch that's at least a year old. It should be a branch that you're willing to potentially sacrifice because you will be cutting it off later.
Got it. So choose wisely.
Exactly. Now, once you've selected your branch, you'll make a shallow cut around it, removing a ring of bark about an inch wide.
So we're creating a gap in the bark.
Yes. Then you'll apply rooting hormone to the exposed wound and wrap it with some damp sphagnum moss.
And the moss helps to stimulate root growth.
Exactly. And to keep that moss nice and moist, you'll cover it with some plastic wrap, creating a humid little environment for those roots to develop. Now it takes a few months for the roots to develop.
So patience is key here.
Absolutely.
Mm.
But you can check on the progress by carefully peeking under the plastic wrap. And once you see a good network of healthy roots, you can separate the new plant from the parent tree and pot it up in its own little bonsai pot.
That's so cool. It's like you're giving that branch a chance to start its own life as a bonsai.
Exactly. Air layering is a fantastic technique for expanding your bonsai collection and experimenting with different styles and varieties.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground in this episode.
We have.
From the basics of placement and watering to the intricacies of wiring and advanced styling techniques.
That's right.
We've really delved into the art of ficus bonsai care.
Yeah.
We've definitely given our listeners a solid foundation
Yes.
for understanding these fascinating trees.